Hey, how's it going, everyone? I am doing my first Facebook Live. I did a class last night for Kids App Community Resources on the same topic, and I thought it'd be a good one to share for anyone who missed it or anyone who wants to catch it on the replay. So this is the replay on savings and goals. My name is Philip Godinez. I'm an AFC accredited financial counselor candidate and founder of Reach Your Goals Personal Finance Coaching. And today we're going to talk about how to set financial goals in a way that makes it so you're more successful in actually reaching your goals. And I'll kind of start with a quote from Tony Robbins, which is that the first step into turning the invisible into the visible is setting goals. So just a little bit about myself. Again, my name's Philip. I'm a father of two. I live with my wife and kids in Kingston, Washington. I'm an accredited financial counselor candidate and founder of Reach Your Goals Personal Finance. And I love talking about money and setting goals. I am personally very determined and driven in my own personal life in terms of trying to figure out what I want and the steps that require to get there with some problem solving. And I like helping my clients with that same sort of thing. So the reason I chose this particular presentation for January is because in January, a lot of people are thinking about New Year's resolutions and goal setting. And you might be in that same boat as well. And looking at kind of the statistics, I noticed that not very many people are successful at their New Year's resolutions. And so, I wondered why that is. Like, what is keeping us from, holding these promises we make with ourselves? And so we'll dig in that a little bit deeper. But I wanted to share some of the stats. So, for anyone who sets New Year's resolutions after 1 week, so by the first week of January, 25% of the people who have set New Year's resolutions have already given up on them or failed at them. And by the end of the year, it's only 7 to 9% that actually succeed the entire year through with their New Year's resolutions. So why are we so bad at New Year's resolutions? I think part of the reason is we come up with somewhat vague goals. So it could be, I want to lose weight or I want to save money. And so we'll kind of talk about how, to add some more, be more specific with our goals. So here's kind of a list of short, mid, and long-term financial goals. And, I think it is good to organize them in a way that you can focus on the things that are going to maybe take a little bit longer. So some of your longer term goals and prioritizing which ones of your short-term goals you're going to focus on. So it's not possible for everyone to do everything at once. So sometimes you have to say, all right, well, I need to get my emergency fund in place so I don't tap that savings goal that I'm trying to do for the vacation I have planned. And so kind of at the quote at the top kind of leads to is a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? So the first step is kind of making a plan to actually execute on your goal. And so a good way to make sure that your goal is very specific is to think of this acronym, the SMART goals. You might have heard of this before in the workplace or in other types of goal setting. But I think it's very relevant to personal finance goals as well. So the idea is rather than say, I want to get out of debt, we'll use that as the example. You want to be more specific. So what exactly, how much debt exactly are you trying to get rid of? So if you have $1,000 in your credit card, being more specific, I want to get rid of $1,000 of debt. It also needs to be something that you can track, you can measure your progress. It can't, again, so it can't be just abstract goal that you have set. So if it's, you want to save up a certain amount of money, how much do you need to save in order for you to be successful. And you can even have different milestones along the way, where you can kind of have checkpoints to see how you're making progress. Is your goal actually attainable? So is it possible for you to make $20,000 in 2 months? Especially if you have other competing goals, which ties into the next bullet. Do you have competing goals where you want to save for down payment, but you also want to enjoy life and have a lot more socialization with friends, and that involves more entertainment spending? So to kind of tie in that one example all together, so let's say I wanted to save $1,000 by June. I'll know, halfway there whether I am making that progress, so I can measure my progress from now until June, and I'll know, exactly whether I'll be able to accomplish that or not at any given point. All right, so I'm very much a believer in personal finance being personal. And, I think that what works well for you might not work for somebody else. And so when it comes to why goals are successful for you, it does take a little bit of reflection on what's worked for you in the past and what hasn't worked well for you in the past. And then, so, like I said before, maybe that's, having an accountability partner, a friend to do activities with, a financial coach to talk over finances with. Maybe for you, it's automating things. So automatic savings, automatic investment, having a completely hands-off approach on it. And maybe it's something like setting up barriers for yourself. So example would be to put savings in an account that's hard to reach. So I personally keep a Navy Federal savings account around because it's hard for me to withdraw money from it. It's easy for me to get money in. If I do a direct deposit, I can have $50 of my paycheck goes direct deposited into that account, but I don't have a debit card to withdraw that money. So because it's hard to reach, hard to get at, I know I'm not going to touch it. So, what will work for you could vary. What I'm going to share today are just some tips that, maybe they'll work for you. Maybe you'll want to give them a try. But just some ideas for you to try. So when it comes to goal setting, keeping your goal front and center is important. One way to do that is to, write down your goal, and also to maybe put it in a place that you're going to see it often. So over here on this side of the screen, you can see it's an electronic vision board. So with software like Canva, you can create a vision board nowadays without having to find a whole bunch of magazines and get out your scissors and glue. But you could take this vision board and set it as the backdrop for your computer or for your cell phone background. Another thing that people have found very helpful is to have daily affirmations. So repeating to yourself goals that you have in mind, using the present tense for those. So stating that you are going to save today, or you are going to make progress towards your goals each day. And other times it's kind of reminders. So I tend to do this a lot. I like to put things in my way that I know I'm going to see them. I do that with my bill pay. I have a place where I put bills whenever it's time to pay bills, and they're always there, and I know exactly where they are, and I know that I'm going to get that reminder every time I walk by the table where they're at. And you can do that with things like a Post-it note that maybe you put around a credit card with a rubber band around it. It says, don't forget about this trip that you have planned. Maybe don't do the spending you're planning on doing. and keeping that trip in mind. And then another really cool thing I like to share with you are called savings trackers. And here's some examples of different savings trackers I've come across. So this is just kind of a way to kind of have a little fun with it, be able to see where what progress you're making. Again, having the end in mind. And I really like the idea of setting up milestones and celebrating little progress points along the way. So maybe if you are saving up for a travel fund and you're planning to go to Greece, maybe you would have a milestone halfway through where once you get to that point, you have a nice dinner at a Greek restaurant or something like that to celebrate your progress. All right, so kind of tying this back to personal finances. So I think that the way that I look at your income versus expenses needs to tie in your goals as well. And so you don't want necessarily all of your income going to your expenses, and basically everything's going towards your cost of living with nothing set aside to go towards those things that are important to you, things that bring you happiness, things that you value. So I do that within a budget. So this is kind of a standard budget template. It's got your income coming in and then your outflows for housing, auto, and everything else. And then within everything else, I look and see, how much extra do I have each month that could go towards goals or savings. And so I know, maybe I'll have $400 a month that can go towards goals. That $400, I can decide how exactly I want to divvy that up. On this next screen, the goals planning sheet. And so here's where I can kind of list out the different short, mid, and long-term goals that I have. I can put down how much total I'll need to fund those goals and when I need that money by, so the deadline in mind, which leads us to the monthly contribution that I would need to set aside each month in order to meet that goal on time. And so you can also use this as a planning sheet for, if you, let's say you only had the $400 a month to go, you can kind of have a list of goals that you can plug in because you can't do everything at once. But you can have a list of goals you can kind of plug in. Once you meet one goal, you have another goal to just plug right in and keep saving at that same savings rate. All right, so why do you save? So I like to think about your future self when you think about saving. And it's really hard for us to picture our future selves. I actually picture my past self, my younger self, and so in my personal journey with personal finances, I was in a lot of debt, and I kind of reflect back on how, even though I was in debt, I ended up saving for retirement. Still, I had a 401k, and I kind of made sure I always at least contributed to my retirement fund through my employer. And I thank my younger self for doing that. It's given me a lot more flexibility in my adult life because of that. So kind of try and do the same on the flip side. So if you are young right now, think about your future self, how you're saving for that trip you're going to take in the future, or you're saving for yourself in your older age. And so a couple other reasons to save. So it's things you might want to buy, things you might want to do, and just having that coming out of your income rather than having it be borrowed with debt. The other thing is, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the younger you start to save, the more time it has to grow. So you can definitely do yourself a favor by saving early, saving at younger ages, and not touching that money. And then the third one, I think is really important. If you have some extra savings, it can actually allow you to get out of situations that you don't like you to find yourself in. So an example would be if you had, let's say, a pretty hefty emergency fund, and you had to get out of your apartment, and you were not wanting to break your lease, but if you had some extra money, you could just break your lease, move somewhere else, get out of that situation if it was not where you wanted to be, and change where you live. Or the same could be with a job. So if you're at a job and you are unhappy at your job, having some extra money could give you the opportunity to quit your job and get by until you find your next job. And then finally, saving is important for emergencies that are going to happen. So I get the question a lot, how much do you need an emergency fund? And it really does vary depending on, how long it would take you to get your next job. If you're thinking about your emergency fund being something to fund between employment. But there are things that can happen that, could happen to your health with an injury and being unable to work due to, breaking your leg or something like that too. So, but the rule of thumb is to have at least 3 months of income saved up. And I like to think of that as kind of a bare bones budget that it would cover. So, if something were to happen, more than likely you would, be able to tighten up your purse strings a little bit and cut some expenses so that you could get by a little bit longer. So keep that in mind when coming up with the amount. So tips to help fund your goals. The golden rule is to spend less than you make. And so using kind of a high level budget overview, like I showed you earlier, to make sure that your income is at least covering your expenses and hopefully then some to make some room for your goals. Paying yourself first. So this could be, saving right when you get paid, setting some aside for savings rather than seeing what you have left over and only saving what you have left over. Automating whatever you can. So if you're able to do a direct automatic transfer from your checking account to your savings account, that's one way, or having direct deposit come out of your pay, some of it being diverted to savings is another way. Avoiding bank fees and finance charges. So I'll actually be talking about this at the next Kitsap Community Resources class in terms of banking, but banking should be free for most people. There shouldn't be any cost to do banking. And there are ways to get around even monthly charges that your bank might charge you. Borrow sparingly. So I'm a firm believer in borrowing only what you need. With student loans, that's kind of where we see it happen most often, where you just kind of take all that's offered to you and you don't necessarily need all of that amount. Can make a burden for you later on. But even with credit card debt, so only spend on your cards, what you have a plan to pay off. And then earmark savings for particular goals. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier already. So in terms of building assets, people have different things in mind when they think about assets. I personally consider my primary residence an asset. There's some people that don't think so, but assets can include real estate investments. Could be Bitcoin. It could be stocks and bonds. Or it could be a retirement account and long-term savings. And the main point to this is that there is not a minimum salary needed in order to start saving for things in that kind of asset column. And there's no minimum age either. So even when you're young, if you're able to just set some aside for long-term savings that you plan to not touch and let that grow, we'll see in the next slide how that can have an impact. So this is the separate video I've done on this Facebook channel already on compound interest. So if you want to learn more about compound interest, you can find a video of it there. But really, compound interest is just letting your savings build up, and then that savings earns interest on it. And so the kind of savings just kind of snowballs and gets bigger and bigger. The opposite of that would be to actually withdraw as you have earnings. And so you're kind of taking your interest off the table rather than letting it continue to grow exponentially. And so this is a quote from Albert Einstein. He says, in regards to compound interest, he who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. So we talked about kind of the earning side of things. If you have some investments, savings that you're not touching that are growing interest, the opposite of that is interest with regards to debt. So if you're carrying debt and you're not paying it off, then the next month the interest is even greater than it was the month before. And so that's compound interest working against you over time. And this is a compound interest calculator that I really like from NerdWallet. And this is kind of going through this example with someone who started with initially $100. They contributed $6,000 each year for 40 years. And we're using a 7% estimated rate of return for this example. And so what you can see here is that over the 40-year period, contributing only $6,000, the person has invested or saved $240,100 in principal. And you can see over here, so that's the blue part of that graph. And then you can see $1 million of that was compounding interest growth over that 40-year period of time. And so this works with very long periods of savings and investing, and it is dependent on that rate of return that is estimated there. So that is it for the presentation. If you have any questions, you can find me on Instagram at Reach Your Money Goals, send me an email, or visit my website at reachfinancialgoals.com.